Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's COVID-19 conversation. We are thrilled that you're joining us today. We're excited to be able to host more of these live events. As you can see, we've kind of amped up our production value today. We are in Edge Productions studio. They are a great Norman business. We're really proud to have them as a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and they have graciously agreed to let us use their studio today. And I would encourage you to reach out to them if you are in need of any kind of production needs, like an event like this, or maybe you have an event in the future that you're going to put on for your organization. They can help you out. So give Edge Productions a call. And as you can see, we're safely distancing today, so this is great. It's worked out really well for us. Well, before we get into the conversation today, I wanted to tell you about some things that are happening with the Chamber of Commerce. We have some great events that are upcoming, but before I get into those, I want to remind everybody that we have just recently amped up our website. So we've completely redone it. It's great. I want you to get on there. You can update your member profile. Go to normanchamber.com and make sure you do that just as soon as possible. We have some really neat new additions to the website, like you can do job posts. If you happen to have a deal, sale that's going on, you can put that on there. You can gain access to the calendar. There's lots of great new offerings to help you and your business succeed. So go to normanchamber.com. In addition to that, on our website, we have a very robust COVID-19 page. So please go check that out. A ton of great resources. I know we're 2 months into this crisis and our community has been shut down for a long time now. Businesses are reopening though. They've never completely shut down. Business has always been open in Norman, but we are reimagining how we work with each other, how we do goods and services with each other, and just how we, a new life that's in front of us. And a lot of the things we have on our website and the ways that you can interact with fellow chamber members and customers throughout our community, the new offerings on our website can really help you out. So we are pivoting and moving forward with a lot of great new programming and doing it in a really safe way. So I wanted to make you aware of a few events that are forthcoming. So in addition to today's COVID conversation that we're about to have, this afternoon at 4 p.m., we're going to have Business After Hours. Fowler Automotive is hosting that. Jonathan Fowler is going to be on the Zoom call with us this afternoon, so you can get the link to that on our website or our Facebook page. And Jonathan's going to talk about the impacts of the crisis on the national automotive industry, and then drill down on how that's impacted his business here in Norman. On top of that, we have another COVID conversation this Thursday at 10 a.m. with a physician from OU Medicine. We're going to dig deep on how you can safely reopen your business. Next week, as scheduled, we have Business Before Hours. It's going to be hosted by Norman Regional Health System. Richie Splitt, the hospital administrator, is going to talk to us about how they're dealing with the crisis and also give us an update on the Inspire Health Plan. Again, that will be online on a Zoom call. The link to that you can find on our website or on our Facebook page. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up the month with a virtual lunch and learn. That's at 1 p.m. on May the 28th. You can register to that on our website, and it's going to talk about your customer persona. So make sure you check that out. It's going to be a lot of great information that you can use to help your business thrive and how you can deal with your customers. So let's dig into today's conversation. I'm excited to have Matt Clouse with Valliance Bake with me, and also Aaron Jaqua with Eide Bailey. Both of these gentlemen are on the Chamber of Commerce board. Matt's our chair, Aaron's one of our board members, so I'm thrilled to have their expertise and knowledge to talk about one of the most critical parts of the recovery process, which is how you can properly access all of the relief packages that have been passed down to us from the federal government, and then how you take those dollars and use them appropriately within your business and your operations. So let's get into it. Matt, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Talk to us about some of the programs that that the federal Congress has passed already, and maybe what you've seen and some things we should be looking for.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Edge Productions, for having us here today. This is fantastic. So I would say banking, we've been really busy. The CARES Act has been kind of a really great deal for a lot of our locally owned businesses. That was a $2 trillion legislation that was passed. Within that was the Payment Protection Program. The first phase was $349 billion. The second phase was $320 billion. A lot of local businesses have already got their payment protection loans, but if you have not, please reach out to your banker today. There is still money. The whole point of the program was to help with payroll expenses through the pandemic and help small businesses with 2.5 months of payroll. So there's a few exceptions. For the most part, if you haven't gotten a loan, if you're a small business, you take your 2019 average salary, and salary includes benefits like retirement, health insurance, and some other employee pieces. You times that by 2.5 months. If you're a sole proprietorship, you take your 2019 earnings divided by 12 times 2.5. If you're a 1099, you take your 1099 income average for 2019 and you times that by 2.5. So if you have not got a payment protection loan, please reach out to your banker today. Norman has a ton of great bankers. And and on that front, I'm really, really proud of Oklahoma. And the Chamber, we have a lot of great members that are community bankers, but this program I think has been really effective, and Oklahoma has benefited from it, especially small businesses. So to date, we've Oklahoma community banks, or Oklahoma banks have processed around 60,000 payment protection loans, and $5.5 billion has come right back to the state of Oklahoma and helped small businesses in need. So overwhelmingly, most of these loans are smaller, 150,000 or less, and I've been really proud of the community banks, because even though the top 5 banks in the country control about 45% of the assets, over a third of the payment protection loans have been processed by community banks. So and I know all the banks in Norman have done a good job. Now with that, we've had they dropped a bomb on us this weekend that we've all been waiting for, but the forgiveness piece came out. So we've all been, so if you out there at home that have taken a loan, you're like, what's going to be forgiven, what's going to be forgiven, what's going to be forgiven? The application came out this weekend. So I know for us personally, we reviewed it yesterday. We put together the fillable application, and we're sending that out to all of our clients today. So if you have a payment protection loan, reach out to your bank. The application is out there. You can get it on the SBA.gov website, and I'm sure we'll have it on the Chamber website today or tomorrow. But it is actually an 11-page application. You have to submit the information to the lender, and it goes through numerous details. And I think it's really well done. There's several tests on there on the forgiveness piece, but for the most part, you can protect. You're trying to protect the entire amount to forgiven, but 75% can be salary and payroll related. The other 25% can be mortgage interest, rent, utilities, and it does give some specifics on what counts as utilities. We've had several questions over the last 6 or 8 weeks. Is telephone, does that count? Does this count? It gives some very specific details in there. There are some tests to make sure that you have the full forgiveness. So there is a full-time employee test that's page that's in there, and there's also a salary and wage reduction. But my advice is to get the application as soon as possible and get with your CPA or your bookkeeper and start documenting it as best you can. The devil's always in the details, but and there's also a list of documentation that they require, whether that's tax forms, third-party payroll, copies of utility invoices. But if you from the take back for the day on the payment protection loan, it's been a good program. It's been effective. There's still money out there, so if you haven't gotten it, call today. And if you did take a loan, even though there's not an urgency to do anything about it today, because the first one's, the forgiveness piece won't come in for another 2.5 weeks, but the application forgiveness is out there. So just reach out to your local banker.
Hey Matt, there was another piece to this, I think, that the Congress passed earlier on, the economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL loans. Mm-hmm. Did you have some experience with those, and is any of that money still available?
My understanding is there's still some money available, that they did lower the amounts of loans. Originally it was going to be 6 months of working capital, and they've lowered it because of the demand. But I've had numerous customers that have gotten the grant piece of it. I've had several customers, even had one call me yesterday, said we've got $150,000 off of it, where the money went into their account, which was actually the loan piece of it. But I do have several customers that are also in the queue, because in that program you don't work through the local bank, you work directly with the Small Business Administration, and you get assigned a caseworker. So that if you can do both. You can do a payment protection loan, and you can do the emergency disaster loan. You just can't use them both for payroll. You can't duplicate the payroll piece.
Okay, very good, awesome. And I want to remind everybody that's tuning in right now, we're on Facebook Live, so if you happen to have a question, Matt and Aaron, they are here to answer your questions. So please type those in the comment section, and I will relay those to these two gentlemen. Matt mentioned CPA and making sure that your business is appropriately accounting for these funds as you receive them. So Aaron, we're going to kick it to you. Let's talk about that piece of this whole process.
Yeah, so typically whenever I speak or I'm with anyone, I always tell them they got to have their 5. And it's not really in any order of preference, but it's probably a little self-serving. But it's CPA, attorney, banker, insurance, and marketer. Okay, this is an exact scenario that happens, and you go to your list and you pick out, okay, my CPA, my banker, and you call them, an actual person, and you say, all right, given everything that's going on, what do I need to do to keep my business going, save money, save on taxes? How do I take advantage of everything that's happening, right? Because when you Google, I mean, it's not very refined. So it comes up with a million things. So this is where you need your person, okay? So we've been working with a ton of clients on all the stuff that's been coming out. I'm sure bankers and CPAs alike, one day, we may get back to where only we did tax returns, and not digesting massive tax law reform in a matter of minutes. So, but one of the things that we've been kind of walking through with the PPP loan, so the Payment Protection Program, so there's a forgiveness piece to this, which is very attractive, obviously. The main thing that's also come out later, this is kind of how the government works sometimes, is they shoot first and aim second. So they've released a bunch of money, and they're saying, yeah, it's going to be forgiven, just go out there, and then they keep issuing guidance. As a CPA, this is nothing new. So we're used to retroactive tax treatment, like, hey, you can now go buy that equipment 2 years ago and write it off 100%. We're all like, great, thanks. So we're used to that. But, they've continued to release some guidance as far as how is this going to be forgiven, because everyone wants to take the free money, but they also know that there's got to be a catch, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. But in this case, there actually can be. So I know our firm and lots of other firms and banks, they've all come up with their own models that they're using to help their customers and clients determine and track and prove the forgiveness piece of this loan. So that's your starting point, is if you're one of those that waits till November to go back and review all your expenses for the year, like, this is going to be really painful. So I would say start now. Every dollar that's being spent that's coming from that PPP loan, you're going to have to account for. So immediately just start to dig in, allocate, have the paper trail, the documentation to prove where it goes. And then, yes, work with your CPA and with your banker to make sure that you are providing all the stuff up front to make sure you're going to be able to actually take advantage of what is being offered. So, we've also had some other questions. Okay, well, hey, we've heard about this employee retention tax credit. So what should I do? Should I take the tax credit or do the loan? And it's my favorite and most depressing answer, which is it depends. And that people hate that, and I hate that. But it really does depend on your specific situation. One is a cash flow decision, and one is a tax situation. And sometimes we feel like those should be the same, but they're not. So if you did take a PPP loan, you cannot take the employee retention tax credit. Now, they've offered it on the IRS FAQ regarding the tax credit. Can I pay back the PPP loan before the cutoff date and then take the credit? Yes. So you may have some that are going to do that. But so you may say, okay, we have clients that say, okay, what does it take then to get the retention credit? So let's just hit on that. Like, what is the credit? The credit is, I'll give you the governmental language, which is 50% of qualified wages up to $10,000 for the employee. You could just say you get a credit for a maximum of $5,000 per employee, but it's always got to be a lot longer than that. So, but I would say qualified wages, that's standard, typical compensation. You know, you can get into the weeds, but it's just think about if you've got an employee that you're paying wages to, if it gets up to $10,000, then you can take 50% credit of $5,000. So you might think, okay, that's awesome. So how do I know if I'm an eligible business? That's the other question. Well, they give you an either or. The first is you have to be either fully or partially suspended operations due to a government order. Now, you might be sitting there thinking like, well, what all goes into that? That feels like that could encompass a lot. And you're right, it does. So again, this will be something you're gonna have to dig into the weeds on. We can't right now, to make sure that you would cross that hurdle. The other hurdle is if in a calendar quarter of 2020, your revenue drops below 50% of that same calendar quarter in 2019, then you're considered an eligible employer. So you're saying, man, my second quarter 2020 is way below 50% of what 2019 second quarter was. Great. Your window starts, you can start taking the credit. And you say, well, how long can I take this credit? As soon as your next calendar quarter is only 80% of the prior year's quarter, then it's end. That's your finish line, okay? So between that period, you can take a tax credit on your payroll, and it's how it's going to work. It's actually refundable. So that's the one big thing here to remember. And you may say, then how do I get it? Here's a couple different ways. The main way is going to be when you go to file your normal payroll tax returns. So you're going to go file your 941, and the second quarter, they're supposed to update the forms to where there will actually be language for this, but you'll say, okay, here's the amount of the credit, and in theory, what would happen is you would have an overpayment, and then that would be refunded to you. So you get the cash that way. Another thing they're allowing businesses to do is to defer payroll taxes, and what they mean by that is the employer's share of Social Security, okay? You can defer that. 50% is due at the end of 21, and the rest of it's due at the end of 2022. So you can defer, it's like starts in mid-March all the way through the end of 2020. So that's one way too. If you think about you're not making your payroll tax deposits, that's extra cash in your hand, and you kind of work out all the numbers on the payroll reports. The other way is there is a form 7200. Some of you just went to your happy place and you're thinking about lunch or anything what I just said. But just give me your CPA. But it's a way that you can actually apply to get the cash that you know you would get anyway up front. So what they've really tried to make it is how can businesses get cash sooner? And so the question has always been, okay, there's PPP loan, there's this employee retention tax credit, and so there are a lot of different vehicles and options.
You know, this whole crisis, I love that top five. You need your five.
Yeah, you got to.
Because let's face it, you get in the weeds on all these issues, and none of us are the all-knowing expert on any of this stuff. And so you need expert advice and input on this. So Aaron, let me ask you this.
Okay.
March and April is a busy time for you regardless, right?
Right.
So what's it been like to throw on top of that a global pandemic that has forced you to all of a sudden get thrown into all the stuff you just described? What's that been like?
Oh yeah, I mean, besides just totally easy and seamless, no, I mean, it's been a super official word, bonkers. I mean, crazy. So I haven't had a haircut, which normally I've had bosses that tell me like, I don't know if you've ever had a haircut. So, but you've got that.
Yeah, no, wait, hold on. I noticed that in your top 5, the barber was not.
No, it's not.
So,
you don't even need that, right? No, I'm just kidding. I do. I have a barber named Barbara that she's cut my hair since I was 3rd grade. So anyway, I do finally have one of those scheduled. But, you're right. It was crazy to get that stuff, kind of all flood us at the same time. What made it even more fun was when you're talking about working remotely from home, or in our case, we had a nanny at our house and we're going to my mom's house and I'm literally working at my sister's childhood desk in that childhood chair. But Wi-Fi works and, thankfully our firm has a technology where it was the next day, we just kind of kept rolling. So you keep rolling with it and everything, but it's been wild. So, but clients, thankfully most governing agencies extended the due date to July 15th. So as far as the federal and the OTC for Oklahoma, they've extended the due date for your personal tax returns to July 15th. So that kind of gave, a little bit of a relief. For us, it meant like, hey, you're almost done with this marathon. Just kidding. You have 10 more miles to go, so don't stop. And by the way, here's some extra things to learn and figure out why you're going. So it did make that longer, but it did give a bunch of people relief. And it honestly kind of let off a little pressure to be able to help, because we weren't really getting a lot of questions from clients saying, where's my tax return? They were really saying hey, with all this new guidance, how do I get my stimulus money? How do I get a PPP loan? How do I get, one of those EIDL loans? How do I get these tax credits? That's our main thing, is you're trying to figure out, we have to be able to pivot to Matt and I and all the CPAs and bankers in Norman to help our community forward. And you can't get so locked down in what you've always done, no matter, even if that's the accountant's way.
So Independence Day is going to have a whole new meaning for you.
Oh man,
so
no doubt.
Get to the middle of July. So Matt, there's been a kind of a new topic that's arose in this conversation. The CARES Act has kind of been the umbrella for the largest chunk of the federal relief. But in that, there's a new program that's coming about called the Main Street
Lending Program.
Main
You're
Street
right.
Lending
Yeah, that's
Program.
a great.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So under the CARES Act, the EIDL loans and the payment protection loans were kind of phase 1. Let's keep businesses open, keep payrolls in place. Phase 2 is the Main Street Lending Program, and there's actually 3 categories within the Main Street Lending Program. They are different than the payment protection loan. They are not forgivable. Banks are doing the underwriting, but they do have attractive terms. They're interest only for a year, and then for year 2, 3, and 4, you can start paying them back. They're intended for businesses that were financially sound prior to the pandemic, but then the pandemic really hurt their businesses. And so the Federal Reserve is backing those, not as a guarantor to the companies individually, but the banks will make the loan, then the Federal Reserve will buy back a large percentage of those loans. So and one thing that they've done, as Aaron mentioned earlier, with the payment protection plan, they got the information out and they tweaked it. On the Main Street Lending Program, they really have gotten the information out to stakeholders, banks, financial credit unions across the country, and they're kind of refining it to have more of a polished product when they release it. So I expect that'll be out in the very, very near future. So.
Now, I spent a decade of my life in the banking industry, and this whole concept of banker's hours, I know that's not true, but your world's been turned upside down too, right?
It's been crazy. Much like Aaron's, we didn't see any disruption in our service. We had the technology in place, so for the safety of our clients and our staff, we try to get as many people to work remotely as possible, but we had the technology in place, and lobbies are shut down, but we're open by appointment. So we still have things that need to be notarized or signed, and I think just the entire industry, like what title companies have done, appraisers, you just see the trickle-down effect for all the financing side. Everybody's reacted, and it's been really a blessing. But as far as banker's hours, no. As I said before, in the state of Oklahoma, bankers have done 60,000 of these. I know for us, it's been a lot of long hours, a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, but nothing more gratifying than be able to help a local business in Norman, help ease that burden for 2 months of payroll so that they can get their feet back under them through this. So it's been rewarding as well.
You know, that's been the Chamber's biggest concern are our small locally owned businesses and how they're going to survive this significant downturn. I mean, this is unlike any of us have ever seen, even going back to the 08, 09 time period with the recession. And these are really, really hard times. Just recently, the U.S. House of Representatives, they took up another package. I think they called it the HEROES Act. It's significant, even more than what was in the CARES Act as far as the total dollar amount. But I know there's a lot of questions out there about that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's coming, and that will be phase, I think they're calling it 3, and it's $3 trillion. It has passed the House. I'm not sure that it'll pass the Senate as it is now, but I do think a lion's share of it will pass, and so I'm expecting some more lending and some financing stuff to help our small businesses even get out, maybe even get closer to 3, 4, 5, 6 months till we can get our feet back under them. Though with that said, one thing I do want to mention, because I think it'll impact a lot of our Norman businesses, is that if you have an existing small business administration loan that you've done through a bank under the 7A program, a part of the CARES Act is that they were going to make the payments for 6 months. If you or on any new loans that are made between now and September 27th. So if you saw something, if your bank has not told you that and you have a 7A loan and the SBA has started making their payments, last month was the first month that they made them. So if the SBA made your payment last month, you actually have the right to go in and take the piece that you put and put it back in your checking account to help with some liquidity during this time. If
Awesome.
Your bank did a 60 or 90-day deferral, interest-only deferral to help you with COVID-related impact, the SBA allowed you to do the deferral and then add the 6 months of payments that they would make on the end. So that's not getting talked about a lot in the community, but I think that's a very, very helpful tool to kind of give more runway for companies to get back on their feet. So
Awesome. Erin, my wife's an attorney. And she reminds me all the time, document, right?
Right.
I'm sure in your industry it's the same way. Frankly, banking's the same way too.
Yep.
Are there any key documentation that our small businesses should be making sure they're on top of right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about the PPP loan. In some ways, it's going to be just basic bookkeeping and going through and recording all of your expenses and making sure that you've actually got documentation for those. Some of them are very time sensitive. So like, when did this payroll period start and end? When did that lease on the building or equipment start? And so now can you include that as part of the rent expense in the PPP loan? So some of it really does matter as far as when, and it's not necessarily just kind of throwing it all, together. So I think that is one of the deals. And one thing I was going to go ahead and hit on was this net operating loss change. So another thing that the, that the CARES Act did was, you'll remember back in the previous tax reform that started in 2018, all net operating losses for businesses or individuals, you used to be able to carry those back a couple years and then carry them forward. Well, starting in 18, they said no more, you can only carry it forward. And you can only offset 80% of your income. So basically, you're not going to be able to use up those losses like you used to. Well, under the CARES Act, what they've done now is said, okay, we're changing it. So for most taxpayers, this is going to be a calendar taxpayer. It's going to be a loss that happened in 18, 19, or 20. They can now carry back 5 years and then carry forward if they've still got them. But what that really means too, though, is this is basically giving people cash that comes from nowhere. So this is another one of those things where you thought, man, I don't know where I'm going to get this money. This is a way to get money that literally did not exist before. So, for example, I had a client, 2017, they're a cyclical business. So 2017, they had huge amount of income. They're a C Corp. They paid the tax at the top rate. You'll notice in 2018, C Corp rates actually dropped to 21%. So then they had a loss. Well, a loss going forward at 21% is not as much savings compared to 35. Well, what's crazy is they've had a loss again in 19, but because it's every couple years they may have this bump in income, the timing was such that they had the income right before the tax reform passed. Well, now under the CARES Act, we can go back and carry those 18 and 19 losses back to 17 and literally offset income that was paid at a higher rate. So it's total permanent tax savings. So it's not just timing, it's like permanent savings. And the IRS, what they've done is they said, okay, because they're all working remote too. So it's really hard to get anything from the IRS. Like we have a tax controversy group that is set up to receive transcripts directly from them. But, I've had realtors and bankers and stuff that have said, hey, we got customers that need to get transcripts. Like, how do we do this? And it's like, man, it's really hard because the IRS is working remote too. So you can't mail in something and know that it's going to be done very quickly. Well, what they've done is they've said, okay, if you're going to do an NOL, net operating loss carryback, you can file this form that normally it's too late to file. But they've said, we'll go ahead and let you file it for 2018. And you just fax it in. So yesterday I drew one up for this client and we'll just fax it in and they'll get cash back. And so you're like, well, that's amazing. Another thing is that starting in 18, individuals, so if you have a pass-through in a partnership or an S Corp or you're a sole proprietor, if you had a business loss of more than $500,000, it was capped at $500,000. And the excess had to be carried forward at that same 80%. Well, they've also now said, hey, there's no limit on that. We're going to let you take beyond $500,000. We'll delay that to 2021. So they're really trying to work at people who are going to experience losses now, losses in the past, and losses in the future to try to recover some cash that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. So I have a client who in 18, had $537,000 loss. So that $37,000 was going forward. Well, we could just amend 18, take the full loss, carry it back to 16 and get him $100,000+. So it's little things like that. And obviously it's very client specific and circumstantial, but it's just things that we all need to be aware of, that we can get creative, which in the accounting world sounds very risky and something you're not supposed to say. But what I'm trying to say is, in these times, like, there are a lot of options that have been given, and you really have to start looking at, okay, how can we make this one work with this one and this one, and to maximize the place that the business or the individual could get to be in a better spot.
Awesome. I think each of you have talked about eligibility, who's eligible for these dollars, but I know we've received a lot of questions about your sole proprietors, gig workers. Mm-hmm. They can apply for these dollars too, right? Mm-hmm. So if you happen to be in that position, you're eligible. And in Norman, we're really blessed to have a huge social service industry here, a very strong safety net. What about 501c3s? Are they eligible?
Yeah, so I'll let Matt speak to the PPP loan part.
I think that's coming. I really do.
Well, the C3s are eligible
C3s,
today.
right,
yeah, right?
But I think for the sixes, excuse me, you said threes. I thought you said sixes. The threes are the sole proprietorship, 1099. I do think the sixes are coming in this next phase.
Yeah, the organizations like the Chamber, or there's some others in town who we're a business also, and we have not been eligible so far. So hopefully the next phase will include those. But our nonprofits, though, in Norman today, can avail themselves of these dollars.
That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right.
Very good.
For that, and all the payroll tax related credits or deferrals, they can also take advantage of that too.
Okay.
So.
Great. Well, guys, as we begin to wrap up, is there any other closing thoughts that you might have that you want to share with our audience today?
Well, I would like to say just thank the Chamber for all they've done, but over the last 8 to 10 weeks, it's been tough, and I've been, constant conversation with clients, and it's a struggle, and I can see it. But I will say I'm starting to see a little bit of light in the tunnel. The numbers at the hospital are looking better and better, and just the feedback. Like yesterday alone, feedback from talking to clients all day. Still cautiously optimistic, but I'm starting to see signs of improvement, financially in their businesses and work starting back up. And so I just think Oklahomans, especially Normanites, we're resilient. So let's just keep fighting and we'll get through this. So.
Amen to that. Aaron, any closing thoughts?
I think, again, thanks to the Chamber, because you guys in this time, what's been interesting, I've seen it in our firm, I've seen it with the Chamber and the city, and even at obviously the national global level. Communication is key, and it's probably the defining factor. And so over communicating has actually been a part of it that's, I think, been so helpful. So you guys leading out with our Norman businesses, which has kind of obviously helped out with all of us as individuals. But I think, again, to be able to lay down, maybe our own personal endeavors in order to see, okay, how can we see the benefit of the community as a whole? And so that's why, when someone comes in, it's like, hey, it doesn't really matter. I know this is probably not good for marketing, but what CPA, what banker you go to, but in this time, you just need to make sure you've got someone. So that's kind of been our big push, has been like, okay, and especially I think just even being from Norman and in Norman, you can just tell that, like, after all of this, the thing that will exist is still Norman. So the question is not like, what is the mayor going to do for us, or what is the Chamber going to do for us, or what is so-and-so. It's more, how are we going to help our neighbors and our friends and our community and our businesses, and so being grateful and just saying, all right, let's all show up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll put a plug in on that note for a Facebook group that we put together called Together for Norman Biz. That's together, the number 4, Norman Biz. And it was a group that we started probably a month and a half ago to be a sole source for Norman businesses to go and post things that they're doing. They've all had to transition and operate a tad differently, and that's going to continue to be the case. We are facing unique different times, and so whether it's curbside pickup or making sure that people are wearing masks, ordering off of your phone, myriad of different things. And so if you're a business, you can go and join the group Together for Norman Biz. If you're a consumer, go check back often, because there's a ton of great deals out there. People want you to come and frequent their business, and even professional offices like a bank or a CPA firm, they want you to come call on them so they can best serve you. So go check that out, Together for Norman Biz. And guys, I really appreciate you joining me today on this COVID-19 conversation. This has been great. Great information, great data, and great input here. Again, a huge shout out to Edge Productions for allowing us to utilize their studio right here in Norman. So if you're a business or an organization that needs an opportunity like this, please give them a call. Whether it's them, Valliance Bank, Eide Bailey, or the other 1,500 businesses in Norman that are members of the Chamber of Commerce, they're all listed on our website, normanchamber.com. You can go to the membership directory, and so if you're in the need for a CPA, a banker, or a production company like this, you can go there and find some wonderful Norman businesses who are there to serve you. I want to remind everybody again about a couple of our events that are upcoming. This afternoon, we'll be on Zoom with our Business After Hours a little bit early from 4 to 5. You can go get that link on our Facebook page or on our website in the calendar. And then please join us there for a great opportunity to network digitally or virtually. And we're going to learn a little bit about the impact to the automobile industry this afternoon. And then we're going to have another COVID conversation this Thursday with a doctor from OU Medicine. We're going to learn more about how to safely open up your business. We have another great networking event next Wednesday, Business Before Hours at 8 a.m. with the hospital. Again, that'll be virtually, so look for the link. And then we have a lunch and learn, free to you. You just need to register ahead of time. That's at 1 p.m. next Thursday afternoon, next week. So go check that out. And stay tuned. Aaron mentioned that we're putting out a lot of information. So whether it's our weekly e-minders, we're sending out e-blasts periodically throughout the week to provide up-to-date new information. Matt mentioned the next federal relief package that's forthcoming. We are at the table in the middle of those conversations. We're regularly talking to our U.S. senators and our federal Congressman Cole about what businesses need to get past this moment in time. And so we're going to continue to keep you abreast of how that's developing and what you can be looking for. Follow us on social media. Could be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're on those platforms, so you can follow us there for up-to-date information. And just stay tuned. Stay tuned to what's going on and support each other. I said this from day one, we're going to get through this together. And we are getting through it together, and we're going to get past this. And I think, as Matt mentioned, we're going to be even stronger when we get through this. But it's going to take a lot of working together to make it happen. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today, joining us in this conversation. And we look forward to seeing you, whether it be virtually or in the not too distant future in person. So until then, take care of yourself, your business, and your family. Stay safe and healthy. We'll see you soon.